I've talked before about how much I like negative space. Lots of clean negative space. And that last part is really important because it's what makes this style a challenge. It can be really simple to put space around your subject, but it can be much harder to keep that space clean and simple.
Let's look at what we do have to work with when we're talking about creating simplicity in outdoor photography. We have blank environments sometimes, like shooting under the water or shooting surrounded by snow in the mountains, or even shooting up at a blank sky. But I don't have an underwater housing, I'm not currently in the mountains, and the sky can be a little bit too normalised to create interesting images. So we often, in everyday outdoor life, aren't given blank environments to work with. So what else can we do? Well, we can introduce separation into the frame. We can separate the subject from the background by using a shallow depth of field. And this separation looks really good. The subject stands out and we lose detail in the background, thus creating simplicity. But it often isn't quite enough. Which brings us on to the third thing that we can make use of. The thing which I may be over-enthusiastically calling the one thing to simplify your images. Foreground elements. Photographing in and around woodlands can lead to very cluttered images, and so it may be the last thing on your mind to introduce more elements into the frame. But by placing large elements in the foreground of your image, like these two trees, you can remove a lot of the distracting background, simplify the image, and bring the viewer's attention straight to the subject. And that's what I've been putting into practice this morning. I was at a great birdwatching platform on the other side of this nature reserve that I'm on. I was photographing small woodland birds and waiting to see if a buzzard would come through, which I've seen there before. And the buzzard did come through this morning, only for a moment, but it used a different perch than I was used to, a much more cluttered perch, and so this technique of using larger elements in the foreground came in really handy to declutter the image. Whilst I was there, I didn't want to be talking out loud too much because there were other people around birdwatching, and so I shot some POV footage, which I've got on here and I can talk you through now to show you what I was doing with each picture. As I said, I started with the woodland birds, and a great example of how this technique was working was with this robin. As you can see in the video, there's a large tree right in the centre of the frame, and I'm moving to my left to get the edge of the tree as close to the robin as I can, thus removing as much background as it's able to without covering the robin at all. Pair that with some really nice backlighting from the early morning sun across the moss and on the back of the robin, and I think this is a really nice picture. With this next bit of video, there wasn't actually a subject there. I was just using this notch of wood to show you how lighting can affect the foreground element. So at the beginning, I'm shooting, as I did with the robin, I'm using the shaded side of the tree as a foreground element. But it is an option that I can move to the other side of the tree. And now the part that's out of focus in the foreground has the sun on it, and you get a very different look. In my opinion, I don't like it quite as much because with the sun on the tree, it becomes quite distracting itself. It isn't taken away from the picture, it's adding another element in. And then the robin came back, but it sat further away this time. And these two images I'm going to show you are a great example of how one technique isn't always the perfect one to use for every situation. You know, there's lots of ways to shoot the same subject. So I started out by just using the sticks that the robin was sat on to frame it. I wasn't focusing on any foreground elements. And the background here is nice and soft, it's not that distracting. I think it works well, it's a nice picture. And then coming back to the technique that I've been practicing today, I used that large tree from before on the left side of the frame again to get the shaded side of the tree and block out the background of this robin, and this is the result. So you can see between the two which you prefer. They're both quite nice images which work well in their own right. This next part is when the buzzard arrived, and you can see me straight away looking for gaps in the sticks. What I'm looking for is quite dense amount of sticks, but with a gap in between that I can see through to get the buzzard. And I've not quite got it here, so I'm slowly moving around to the right, and I'm moving up and down and checking through all the little gaps to see which one reveals the buzzard's head. I didn't find that composition I was looking for until I used the large tree trunk in the centre of the frame. As I slowly crept around to the right of it, the Buzzard was revealed and a lot of the frame was taken up by the out of focus foreground. It looked really good. And then right at that moment, before it flew away, that's when I wanted to take a picture. But that doesn't matter, we got some nice video of it and maybe I can take a screen grab from the 4K footage. Overall, I think it was a good morning. I got some nice images in the early light, and it gave me some good situations to show you examples of how I was using tree trunks, which are everywhere in a woodland, as a foreground element to help block out the other thing which is so common in a woodland, which is the cluttered background.
The tours of Dartmoor and the open vistas that they provide are a favourite location of mine to shoot. Ponies roam the moors, grazing amongst heather, rocks and weather-beaten trees. The open spaces provide unending views as the sun goes down, creating layers of fields, hills and tors off into the distance. This lone Dartmoor pony I found is making an amazing subject. The openness of Dartmoor is on full display here, but I came out to photograph something simpler. Just the pony, the sunset and maybe a little context of the further landscape. Dartmoor has lots of these rock piles, which I can use to eliminate certain things from the frame, calm down the image and create this beautiful silhouette. I'm photographing this lone pony, standing above the moors on its own with the sun right behind it, and I'm using the shaded side of the rocks so that if I underexpose to get detail in the sky, the foreground's going to go really dark, almost black, which is going to help with the simplicity. I've looked at the picture on the back of the camera and I think it works really well. Now I'm going to watch the last 15-20 minutes of this sunset and also the moonrise. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and I'll catch you next time.